This will undoubtedly be a controversial video, not because of its contents per se, but by the reaction it may elicit in some sectors of the left. There exists a trend, mostly within the white Western left, to deride or outright dismiss many socialist experiments, either by solely focusing on and magnifying their errors, or by explaining away their triumphs. This being a trend of white Western leftists is simply based on my own observation. I have never seen it from black and brown comrades in the third world, and only rarely see it from black and brown comrades in the first. Maybe that's more of a commentary on leftist organizations in the West than anything else, but I digress. Before I start, let me first define what I mean. Left-wing anti-communism is a trend we see that simply dislikes and disregards almost every successful socialist experiment to have ever existed. Now, we can debate whether they were the true pure socialism trademark that the pure socialists have in their minds or not. That isn't the point. These were nonetheless experiments with no former grand blueprint or guide that attempted to organize society along lines different to capitalism. They were successful, in my opinion, in doing so, and genuinely stood as the greatest and most long-standing threat to global capitalism to this day. Even their memory stirs fear in the hearts of the ruling class, and that's why, to them, they must be demonized at every turn. However, the left-wing anti-communists will not only reject these experiments, or damn them as the monstrosities that perverted some pure socialism they've dreamt up, but in some cases claim that we don't have anything to learn from them, either. This trend is almost fully supported by the quote-unquote approved, meaning controlled opposition, leftist academics and writers that exist. The Noam Chomskys and the George Orwells of the world. Not only this, but the trend is fully supported by the capitalist establishment, with glowing reviews of books published, and runs and reruns of the books either by the CIAs or Harvards of the respective countries. Now, where do you see this? Am I making this up? No, of course not. If you've read enough literature on the Bolshevik Revolution, for example, you'd quickly notice the pattern of lionizing the first few years of the revolution up until maybe 1922 or 23, and then afterwards severe condemnation. A lot of this mixed with denouncements of Stalinist dictatorship or Stalinist bureaucracy or a Stalinist soap dispenser that doesn't work all that well. This trend very easily fits with the left-wing anti-communist paradigm, as it glorifies the weakest, most fragmented, and most uncertain time period in Soviet history, in the guise of supporting worker democracy, which, by the way, didn't magically evaporate after 1923. This followed along with an absolute lack of nuance when it comes to what had to be done after those first few years of severe lack of effective organization. Had the revolution failed by 1923, ironically, by the very steps they wished the revolution would take instead, they'd be praising it to the heavens to this day. But no, the revolution did not fail then, and had to be consolidated. It had to build up a strong army to protect it from foreign invasion. It had to build up a strong internal security apparatus in order to protect itself from sabotage. It had to ration due to sanctions. It had to maximize living standards for everyone equally instead of a small clique at the top, like under capitalism, and so left something to be desired. Its failure was the fact that it succeeded in the eyes of the left-wing anti-communists. This does not mean, by the way, that I fully agree or disagree with the decisions taken by the Soviets in that crucial early period or afterwards, either. What it does mean is that now we have a tangible tradition of what could be done, its consequences, and from that, all the lessons that could be learned. The difference, though, is that these left-wing anti-communists, in all their arrogance, throw out blanket statements of they should have done this or they should have done that, as if the situation were that easy. Lenin and the Bolsheviks were not stupid, and nor were they some strange conception of bourgeois morality as evil. They were highly intelligent, motivated revolutionaries who, along with the workers and peasants, attempted to build something never before seen on Earth, in the most trying of circumstances. If this does not absolve them, then I'll sit back and await the eternal wisdom of these new comrades to establish the perfect revolution, with its perfect socialism. Interesting that the groups that can't organize a reading circle think they're capable of this. A connected point is, this is an incredibly common phenomenon with left-wing anti-communists, the lionization of every revolution that doesn't succeed. The reason this happens is, because of those revolutions failing, they never had to contend with actually attempting to build a stable and prosperous socialism. If they weren't immediately crushed, they would have had to deal with every other hardship, both material and theoretical, that the socialist experiments had to deal with, and then they quickly would have been relegated to that same category, the category of every other Stalinist bureaucracy they deride to this day. Logically, since these left-wing anti-communists seem to denounce every gain and loss of the former socialist experiments, there must be some substance to their criticism. They clearly paint themselves as knowing better. They should have done this, they should have done that, abounds in their rhetoric. If that's the case, where are their revolutions? Where are their contributions to Marxist theory? Where are their organizations? You have to remember, when it comes to our leftist friends criticizing these movements, something that's always missing is nuance. Not everything was done perfectly, according to these comrades that have never been in that position, nor do they provide alternative solutions, aside from incredibly vague platitudes. Another thing to understand is why there even exists such rampant anti-communism within the left, especially within academic spaces. Putting aside the fact that, due to the century-long taboo on positive Marxist coverage, many liberals have infiltrated the space. We need to also examine how controlled media of all kinds is under capitalist society. The New York Times, and other media organizations, pass articles, parsed through capitalist social hegemony, to be reviewed by the CIAs and NSAs prior to publishing, and similarly, academic publishing houses block anything with even a remotely positive spin on a socialist experiment as a whole. Operation Mockingbird never ended, and you'd be naive to believe it did. Peer reviewers will reject positive journal entries, and publishing houses will outright refuse to look at transcripts if they dare present any evidence without frequent inflammatory damnations of the Soviet Union, Stalin, and socialism in general, regardless of the relevance. Even highly niche works, like Tauger's famine research, or J.R. Getty's research on the Great Terror, cannot escape this. Many times, they have to reaffirm their anti-communist credentials in multi-page prefaces, as if to reassure the reader that they in fact hold no love for the Soviet Union and socialism, and almost apologize for the fact that the evidence points to a nuanced and not cartoonishly evil reality. Nothing is allowed to be published unless it's the most obscure, boring specialist work, and even then, it can only be published by explicitly left-wing publishers or specialist journals. In such an environment of unparalleled freedom, is it surprising that these left-wing anti-communists internalize the hegemony of the ruling class? This leads into the fact that this is more or less prevalent only in the West. I hear these arguments and condemnations almost exclusively from mostly Western, mostly white voices. This doesn't mean that in the Third World, Marxists are ignorant. No, far from it. Marx, Lenin, Mao, hell, even Bourdieu is sold by street booksellers here in Iraq. If anything, those in the Third World, by their personal experience, understand the necessity of nuance and the reasons for what some may deem authoritarian. A meaningless phrase, mind you. In my own country of Iraq, a socialist revolution would do more than enough to offend the sensibilities of our misguided Western comrades. The things that need to be done would have to be done harshly, swiftly, and with the local shortages and issues taken into account. This would result in a socialism that, although imperfect, as humanity is itself, will result in a net positive for people's lives and their children's lives. This is more than enough for the left-wing anti-communists to damn this hypothetical in its cradle. The question of racism cannot be ignored. If you've paid attention, you'd quickly notice how the condemnation of Third World black and brown experiments are almost immediate. Yet, when the lukewarm social democrat that supported the bombing of Yugoslavia runs on a platform of free healthcare, it's as if he's given them the world. Immediately, all his flaws and the consequences of his wildly incorrect theoretical line are excused away, placated, or outright ignored. When the social democrat wants to bring in very benign reform that can only with difficulty be put in place and very easily be stripped away, these comrades sing their praises. But mention Castro, or Lenin, or whoever else actually managed to establish an order that benefited not only their own nation's people, but countless millions worldwide, and you'll hear shouts of evil, dictator, mixed with smug dismissiveness. A frequent claim is that the evil communists wanted only power for themselves, that Lenin and Stalin, Mao, Castro, Ho Chi Minh, and all the others were simply power-hungry brutes that wanted nothing than to hold the population under their thumb. How one gains power by fighting for the rights of the powerless is never explained. Lenin was the son of a petty noble. Stalin had a promising career ahead of him after graduating from a seminary. Mao was the son of a wealthy farmer and was to inherit his father's vast tracts of land to make a very comfortable life for himself. Castro too, was the son of a wealthy landowner, and he too was to inherit his father's lucrative sugar plantations. Yet, the first thing he did was nationalize his own family's farm before any other. The first things all of them did was repudiate that which gave them all that privilege in the first place, in order to fight for the unheard majority. How you can condemn figures that opted to fight brutal and difficult lies for the unlikely possibility of socialism happening within their own lifetimes as evil is beyond me. This is no great man theory. I am but trying to absolve these individuals as history has already absolved them. If our misguided comrades cannot see through the mist of capitalist hegemony is a matter of education and nuance, nothing else. Remember, they condemn a name, a Lenin or a Castro, but in reality, in their misguidance, they are condemning the millions that supported those movements as well. I repeat this as I always do. If leftists in the West achieved 1/10 what former socialist experiments had, they would elate themselves to the stars. This is not to say you cannot criticize those experiments. Far from it, they should be criticized. But there's a time, place, and format this criticism must take place in, and that criticism must be based in evidence and good faith. It must be grounded in nuance and an understanding of the circumstances. This is the criticism honest Marxists take part in, unlike the eternal traitors of our movement such as Orwell, who attacked the Soviet Union at the height of its war against the fascist menace. Yes, the darling of the CIA, the same Orwell that reported Marxists, gays, and black agitators to Britain's secret police. If you hold Orwell in any positive regard, you need to reassess your political inclinations. This leads me to another point. Due to the unending onslaught against the memory of socialism, those that defend examples of former socialist experiments look like blind admirers of those systems. I understand. But that's only because they have been forced to be on the defensive their entire existence, practically. Marxist-Leninists are not blind lovers of those socialist experiments, as left-wing anti-communists are blind detractors. If you doubt this, join a Marxist-Leninist space and ask for criticism. I can assure you, you'll get more than you bargained for. The most scathing criticism of Marxist-Leninist experiments come from MLs themselves. If you continue to doubt this, then stay tuned, as the next video I upload will roughly outline the faults and mistakes of 20th century socialism as I see them. Nonetheless, defending our heritage, while understanding its flaws and learning its lessons, is infinitely better than being a spineless coward that crumbles against the most superficial pressure, and as a result denounces the experiments in their totality only because Red Scare CIA propaganda told them to. This entire topic and so much more is dealt with in Michael Parenti's excellent work, Black Shirts and Reds. I cannot recommend this book enough. Honestly, it's short, just 160 pages or so. You could knock it out in an afternoon. If there is a single thing you should take from this video, it's that you should go and read Black Shirts and Reds. Thank you for watching. If you like what I do, then please consider supporting me on Patreon. It really does help. I'd like to thank my patrons, so thank you to James Kavanagh, Toki Mukai, @Democracy Expert, Alan Plum, Brennan Ruffing, Daniel Williams, Dal McFarlane, Ellie Garzon, Eric G., Grammar Antifa, Granola Joe, Industrial Robot, Jedi Davion, John Bernstein, Jonathan Chavez, Khan, Nutring Imlunde, Liam Sapanen, Libertarian Stalinist, Manda, Mikar Gropoulos, Amar Abdi-Jabbar, Ray Hogginson, Renkel Blancaster, Ring, Sasha Novoseta, Soviet Mystic, Sassi M, Ted Teddington Tedsville, The Turkish Trotskyist, Tristan Druyan, Zatarani, Zarin Arsin, Justin Perdomo, Eugene Semenovsky, Job, Parker Cushing, Malinov, Comrade Benito, August Nilsson, Nobody, Jovian Archiver, Pauline McDeesey, Michael R.W., Farrah Tahon, Scott Radburn, My Little Sullen, Caleb Sosoltis, Brandon Persaud, Judah Drury, Comrade Pingu, and of course Charles. Thank you, Charles. I'll see you in the next one.